Daniel Jones and Jalen Tolbert are the top fantasy sleepers of the week. We wrap up our week 6 fantasy prep by hitting on the best sleepers and DFS plays on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL fantasy and betting for sportingnews.com.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, we're going to wrap up our Week 6 fantasy prep today. We're going to give you our favorite sleeper at each position. So quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end. We'll give you our top guy that we really like this week that you can plug in that maybe you can still find on the waiver wire. And then our top PrizePicks of the week, because we're going to dig into DFS plays, and then also FanDuel to close up the show today. So let's start with our sleeper picks. Right at the top here at quarterback, we talked about him in our quarterback ranking show, but Daniel Jones, he gets a great matchup against the Bengals. He won't have Malik Neighbors, but I still think that Daniel Jones is a playable guy. I mean, last week he scored his season high 21 fantasy points without Malik Neighbors. The Bengals are a bad defense. I still think Daniel Jones is a very playable guy without Neighbors out there.
Yeah, Darius Slayton stepped in, and Slayton and Jones have a long history of playing together. They were the first connection there as rookies, so they know each other well. So that was a natural thing to get going there for Brian Dable. You have Wan'Dale Robinson playing well. You got Tyrone Tracy playing out of the backfield well. Theo Johnson's kind of emerged. Also a little bit of tight end. So you got weapons all over the place. And I think this week, one other thing we'll see added to him is his running. The Bengals can give up rushing yards to quarterbacks as well. I know they just played Lamar Jackson, but you can run on them. The way their defense is structured a little bit, trying to take away some things deep in their zone, there's going to be some opportunities for Jones to take off and run, and maybe he can even get a touchdown that way this week. So we figure it's going to be a high-scoring game. Joe Burrow and the Bengals are putting up a lot of points here, so that should also help the volume and production of Daniel Jones.
Yeah, I mean, he's scored at least 18 fantasy points in 3 of the last 4 weeks. He's been a good fantasy quarterback. Bengals are allowing the 3rd most passing yards and 5th most fantasy points to quarterback position. So a very good play. We don't have Darius Slayton as our top sleeper wide receiver of the week, but he could be here. Yeah. Last week, 11 targets, 8 receptions, 122 yards and a touchdown. Finished as a fantasy wide receiver 7 last week. So Darius Slayton could very easily be our selection at the top. But we like this guy slightly better, and it's Jalen Tolbert of the Cowboys. He's still available on like 60% of leagues out there in Yahoo and Yahoo leagues and ESPN leagues. If he's available, he should be picked up and played. Like, he's one of my favorite plays this week. He played on nearly 90% of the Cowboys snaps last week. It was 89.5. Led the team with 10 targets against the Steelers' tough defense, right? Like, they haven't been as good as when they started, but they're still a good defense. Puts up 7 receptions, 87 yards, scores the game-winning touchdown. And if he gets a similar workload to what he got last week against that Lions secondary, he's going to absolutely destroy them. The Lions are giving up the most receptions per game, receiving yards per game, and 2nd most fantasy points per game to the wide receiver position this year. There's room for both CeeDee Lamb and Tolbert.
Yeah, and you look at the Lions, they're tough to run on, and the Cowboys are okay abandoning the run early and just trying to maybe get their running backs to catch passes. So they'll be right in the mix with Jalen Tolbert, CeeDee Lamb, Jake Ferguson. I think Ferguson could see some tough coverage. They're a little bit better actually at covering with Jack Campbell and some players there on the second level and at safety. So that should be a wide receiver game for the Cowboys. So I think CeeDee Lamb rebounds and has a big game, and I like Jalen Tolbert playing off that in single coverage this week as well.
Yeah, I'm getting him in all my lineups, like every single one. I want him in there. Now, let's get to the tight end before we do running back, because we're talking about an ex-Cowboy here, Dalton Schultz. He has not been the same since leaving the Cowboys, but we expect him to have a nice week in week 6. Last week, this dude played at almost 100% of plays. He was out on the field 98.5% of the time for the Texans. He got 6 targets, only came down with 4 receptions, 34 yards. No Nico Collins for the Texans. You're going to have to spread the ball around more. And the Patriots, the last 3 weeks, they gave up 93 yards to Tyler Conklin, 62 yards to Jonnu Smith, and then they allowed George Kittle to score a touchdown with 45 yards. So they're giving up some points to the tight end position. Dalton Schultz is a sneaky start if you're desperate at the tight end position this week.
Yeah, and we know the Patriots defense is struggling. They have some issues in the middle of the field right now, so that really helps Dalton Schultz. And their third option, they're filling in as they slide up Stephon Diggs and Tank Dell would be Xavier Hutchinson, but I don't know how much you'll see Robert Woods either in this game. So you think they'd be natural for CJ Stroud to go to somebody he trusted a lot last year as a rookie. That's Dalton Schultz in this matchup. So it all adds up. Again, I don't think they're going to try to feature Hutchinson too much. I mean, they have a pretty favorable matchup here, so I think they just need to go with their veterans. So I think you can see Diggs and Schultz having a very good game together here to kind of help CJ Stroud get a little bit better with the turnovers and avoid that, but maybe have a cleanup game playing off the run.
Yeah, I think Schultz is a very viable play this week. Now, running back, this is more your guy than my guy, but I wanted to give you him as our sleeper of the week so you can discuss him a bit more. Braylon Allen, running back for the Jets, behind Breece Hall, but he gets the Bills this week. You discuss why you like him so much.
I will. I'm gladly ready to do that. And actually, I feel better about him than I did earlier in the week because we pivoted from play calling to now Todd Downing, who, by the way, was there in Tennessee when they went nuts with Derrick Henry. He likes to run a lot, and he gets close to 50-50 there with the balance. And that's going to be great for this team because, again, it was 78 or 80 the last 2 weeks here for the Jets. That should not be happening. They need to run the ball. The weakness of the opponent is also screaming to say do that. The Bills, they really can't do anything to fix that run defense right away. They're not very good at also covering running backs out of the backfield. And Allen has proved he can do that as well. So I think a lot of this offense is going to flow through these two backs. We've seen it before in the Patriots game when the Jets are rolling and they have some good things going offensively. It goes through Hall and Allen. A lot of games, they just haven't stuck with these guys enough, right? Get the ball in their hands in different ways, even if they're like held up at the line. Stick with them a little bit. Let them wear down a defense. If they can't get it going that way, throw to them and get them going. So I think this Downing change to now the play caller is going to be huge for these two running backs.
I hope so. My worry with Braylon Allen is he only played on 26% of the plays last week. It's going down for him instead of up. Yeah. But hopefully, yeah. I just want to give one other option here that's on waivers in a lot of leagues as well. Antonio Gibson, he took over the starting role for the Patriots last week. Ramondre Stevenson is not practicing with a toe injury or with a foot injury. We'll see if he plays, but it doesn't seem like he's going to. So that should be a lot of snaps for Antonio Gibson this week with rookie quarterback Drake May. You would expect the Patriots to, try to protect May a bit, run a little bit, do a lot of dump offs because the Texans secondary is very stingy and kind of scary for May to be starting again. So he can get a lot of those dump offs. And the Texans defense hasn't been as dominant against the run as they were last year. They've allowed James Cook, Tank Bigsby, and Aaron Jones to each record over 80 rushing yards against them over the last 3 weeks. So Antonio Gibson's also another viable play. If you had to pick one, would you go Gibson or Braylon Allen?
Yeah, if I'm in a PPR league, 100% I'm going with Gibson because he's going to get involved. All those dump off, shorter passes. I think it's actually good for him and Hunter Henry to have a rookie quarterback in there. Now, the only thing that I'm a little bit worried about with the checkdowns is Drake May can take off and run. And we'll talk about that actually a little bit more when we get into our prize picks. But he's a runner, so that also can take away from just throwing short when he's in trouble. But Gibson is still going to be the lead back, and he's totally capable of doing just the straight up rushing duties here.
Yeah. Well, let's take a quick break and then we'll get into our prize picks of the week. If you don't play on prize picks, we'll tell you how to get involved. But if you don't want to, that's okay. These picks will still help you in fantasy. These are all guys that we really like for fantasy football this week. So we'll get into that right after our break.
This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by Robinhood Gold. With Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial flavors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for the high society. Now, the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.5% APY on uninvested cash, receive unlimited 1% deposit bonuses, and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on an IRA account. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at robinhood.com/gold. That's robinhood.com/gold. Terms apply. For product-specific disclosures, visit robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk. Rates may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold, LLC.
This episode is also brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike all the other apps, it's just you against the numbers on PrizePicks. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. What's also super awesome about PrizePicks is that they're the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy. So, like if you had Jordan Mason in your PrizePicks lineup last night, you would have been okay because it would have your lineup would have still stayed and play with the PrizePicks injury insurance policy. So you weren't sweating that out. That oh my goodness, I just missed out on Mason there. If you picked him to have more than his projection. But Vinny and I will give you our 6 favorite PrizePicks picks of the week in our upcoming segment. And if you want to play with us and get started, you just go to PrizePicks app, download that, and then use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONNFL on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. All right, Vinny. Last week we did awesome on our PrizePicks. We went 6 for 6. I had Jaden Reed more than 60.5 receiving yards. Brian Thomas Jr. hit on him. Justin Fields hit on his 2 touchdowns. You had CJ Stroud on his rushing yards, hit on that. Josh Jacobs on his rushing yards, and Garrett Wilson on his receiving yards. All more went 6 for 6. So let's try to do that again this week. What is your top PrizePick picks of the week for week 6?
Yeah, our sleeper that we discussed a lot was Braylon Allen, and right there with Antonio Gibson. Well, looking at another receiving back in that Jets-Bills game, it is Breece Hall. So I'm going to Breece Hall more than 24.5 receiving yards. Now, I think this will also be a pivot with Todd Downing. You also look at the Bills. They give up more than 60 receiving yards per game to running backs, just running backs alone. So when you look at that, the last 2 weeks, we've seen Justice Hill be a big weapon for the Ravens. We saw Dare Ogunbowale get more snaps than we thought for the Texans. And now you have a guy that's the alpha, Breece Hall, as their top receiving back. So that is great news for Breece Hall. I think they just are going to have a lot of trouble covering him. I think whenever you change coordinators, there's going to be an overcorrection, and the overcorrection is not giving Breece Hall enough touches to win games. Again, if Todd Downing doesn't do this, I was talking about Nathaniel Hackett calling him out, then the Jets have no hope. If he cannot see this, like statistically, matchup-wise, based on his history of calling plays with the Titans, I mean, I don't know what to do. So this Breece Hall if he doesn't hit this number, I would very much worry about Breece Hall the rest of the season.
Yeah, I mean, Breece Hall should have such a good game this week. Yeah. He really, really should. There's a reason they're changing play callers, and it's because Nathaniel Hackett's not using his guys correctly. Yeah. So figure it out. I'm also taking a running back to have more than his projected receiving yards because it's way too low. They have DeAndre Swift at 18.5 receiving yards. He's done that each of the last 4 games. He's had at least 22 receiving yards in each of the last 4 games. But the last 2 games, he's had 72 yards and 47 yards. So way more than double in both of those games. While he gets to face the Jaguars, who have allowed the second most receptions and second most receiving yards to running backs this season, behind only the Bills in each. So talking about Breece Hall there against the Bills and your Braylon Allen love, like, I don't know why this projection's so low. So this seems like maybe it's a trap. I don't know, because it seems so easy to me. But take that DeAndre Swift more than 18.5 receiving yards against the Jaguars.
Yeah, just to play counter, only to say why it might be a trap or why it's that low, is the Jaguars' corner stink. So it could be a game dominated by the receivers, but you can't go by that, right? You have to go by, is Swift involved in the game plan as A receiver. Absolutely. That's what he does. That's what he's been doing his whole career when he's at his best. He's a great receiving back. So that's number one. Number two is he could get this on one play. That's the type of receiving back he is. You get him in the open field, you might need one catch to get you here. So that's what I like about it as well. Like he looks like sometimes he's shot out of a cannon when he gets to the open field. They throw him the right screen pass. So you might be sitting pretty with 120-yard catch early in the game, and you can just sit back and relax and enjoy the rest of the show here. So I do like Swift. I like Hall. I love going for this running back receiving mores that we have done here. Now, my second one is Devonta Smith. So when we look at Devonta Smith, he's a guy that is pretty special. We know that. And he's back too. We're focusing on A.J. Brown. But when we see both of these guys return, I mean, they're going to be interchangeably working the field. And it's arguable that Devonta Smith will have the better consistent matchup with Martin Emerson there. So that's a guy that you can definitely exploit in this Brown secondary. So I look into that matchup. I think it's one of the better wide receiver cornerback matchups of the week. So I do like that. If he gets that coverage, he's going to be busy. 62.5 is the number. So I think he gets 80. There's, I think, a demon pick where you could pick him to go over 80 something, but I would be careful with that one. I feel a lot more comfortable just to lock this one in and take the victory here at 62.5 more Devonta Smith.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I'm so happy for Jalen Hurts that he gets back A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith, but don't just focus on A.J. Brown. Devonta Smith is awesome as well. Now I'm going back to this Lions game. I'm going with Jahmyr Gibbs. More than a half of a rushing plus receiving touchdown. So just has to score one scrimmage touchdown to hit this against the Cowboys. He's scored at least a touchdown in 3 of the 4 games played this year by the Lions. They already had their bye week last week. But also Gibbs, like I know David Montgomery is easily going to score a touchdown too, right? Like every single week, David Montgomery scores a touchdown. They did not have that option on PrizePicks, probably because it's too easy, right? But I like the Gibbs to score too. Not only does he keep getting these opportunities, but he actually leads the team in red zone carries at 14 with Montgomery right behind him at 13. And he only has 1 fewer carry inside the 5-yard line than Montgomery this year. So they're utilizing them back and forth. They're giving them both the opportunities. And anytime these guys get the opportunities, they're scoring. We expect this to be a high scoring game. The Cowboys can be run on. We know that. But also, like, the Cowboys have been giving up touchdowns to running backs this year. They gave up 4 to Alvin Kamara in week 2. They gave up 2 to Derrick Henry in week 3. They gave up 1 to Jerome Ford in week 1. The last 2 weeks, though, they haven't given up 1, but they played the Giants and the Steelers. Those are 2 teams that just don't score rushing touchdowns with their running backs this year. So I think this is a good probability of happening this week. Gibbs getting into the end zone at least once as a receiver or a runner.
Yeah, and these seem to be your specialty here. These touchdowns, they really worked well for Justin Fields last week when he got the pair. And then you look at this situation with the Gibbs. I mean, he's getting chances in the red zone, which is nice to see. They're interchanging him with David Montgomery, who seems to score every week. That's probably why there wasn't a good David Montgomery thing there. Probably had to get 1.5 on David Montgomery because he scores every week. But Gibbs doesn't always score, but I think he's going to score this week, and hope he scores 2-3 times. He's on a few of my teams. That'll be great. And we can take advantage of that after he had a monster week 5 before he got one on bye. So I'll be happy to have him back in lineups, as will everyone else. Drake May is my third one. That's my specialty. Yours is the touchdowns. Mine is the rushing yards by random quarterbacks that we are not looking at for the rushing yards. But Drake May, actually, if you go to North Carolina, this was one of his strengths. He can take off and run. And I think this is a sneaky reason why he's starting over Jacoby Brissett. I think there's a perception that Brissett is this mobile quarterback. Not really. He just sits back there. He's big, and he gets hit a lot. Like, he can run and take off, but it's like lumbering, right? This is why everyone's looking at, the offensive line, Jacoby Brissett is going to get killed. Well, Drake May is not going to get killed because he's going to have the feet to run out of it. He's got some young legs, while Jacoby Brissett is old and slow. So this is going to help him a little bit. And it's a pretty high number, right? For a guy making his first start, 25.5. But The good news is that this matchup, the Texans also are very giving this position. We said the Bills were last week, and that's why we like CJ Stroud, but Stroud's team is also giving it up to running back or quarterbacks more than running backs almost. So when we look at it, I like Drake May 25.5. And again, I just wanted to mention Drake May at some point that he's starting. I will mention another new starter this week, by the way, when we get to our FanDuel lineups.
Ooh, interested to hear who that would be. Yeah, you're really good at these quarterback rushing ones. I don't really have anything to add there. I don't know if he's going to get it or not. I didn't research that, but you have been really good at hitting those. So I trust you for sure. My last one to finish up this, our favorite prize picks of the week is Tank Dell, more than 56.5 receiving yards versus New England. I will admit, this one's more going with my heart and my gut than my brain, but he has, I mean, it's not like he hasn't had a game with 57 receiving yards this year. He did in week 3. He had 62 receiving yards. And also with Nico Collins out, there has to be a different deep threat here, right? Like Stephon Diggs isn't going to be the deep threat. He's going to be the possession guy. We have already seen that there has been a strong connection between Stroud and Dell. Like last year, it didn't just go away.
Reheat it.
Yeah, it didn't just go away. So last year, I mean, how many games did he have over 56 receiving yards? He didn't play for a vast majority of the second half of that season because he broke his leg, but 149 yards, 145, 114, 72, but 57, 56. Like you can go down the list. He had a ton of these games. I think they need him in this matchup. New England's good against the run. And he's going to get some big chunk plays. So I'm taking more than 56.5 receiving yards.
Yeah, I feel really good about your top two picks. I feel really good about my top 2 picks. It's all going to come down, folks. You got to watch this Patriots-Texans game now. We told you this is why you have to watch it. This is also a good way to get into those type of games, right? Playing on PrizePicks, you can invest something and make it worth your while. So I love that by you because, again, Tank Dell, Dalton Schultz, these guys have to step up here without Nico Collins. I think you'll see it spread out much like we saw the Giants losing Malik Neighbor, spreading out and giving some more guys some opportunities. So I like that pick by you. We'll have FanDuel picks from both of us in our final segment. So I'm excited to reveal that and see how we do there. And we did pretty well, I think, last week as well. So I'm excited to dive in and share those right after this break. Speaking of FanDuel, this episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. And it's a good time to get into the action. Hey, what did I say? I said the 49ers are going to come through. That game is going to go over. They did. They came comfortably through throughout the whole game. And the Seahawks gave us some garbage points to help us go comfortably over as well. So another bet I'm looking at on FanDuel Sportsbook is those New York Jets. They're 2.5 point. I say 2.5 underdogs. I was going to say not 2.5 point underdogs, but you know what I mean. Less than a field goal favorite. The Bills are on the road on Monday night. They just fired their coach in New York. They got their offensive coordinator demoted. That team is going to come up fired up against the Bills at home. The Bills are not playing well. This is a great opportunity here. So I like it. All they have to do is basically come through and win at that line. So I like it. The Jets plus 2.5 on FanDuel Sportsbook. Check it out. So when you get a hunch in the middle game, you can check out what you're looking for here to get your big return on FanDuel. That's America's #1 sportsbook. You also can check out live play-by-play and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Go check out your own bets that you can place there. FanDuel.com. America's #1 sportsbook. All right, Michelle, let us close the show. We'll reveal our FanDuel lineups of the week, and this is going to be fun. Doing pretty well so far this season, putting them in and getting some returns, especially if we're playing cash games. So, Michelle, let's start with your quarterback here.
So I'm going with Dak Prescott because I love him this week. He's my fire start of the week. If you go read my article over at PFF, I love the matchup against the Lions secondary. The Lions are good at stopping the run. I think he's going to pass a ton to CeeDee Lamb and Jalen Tolbert, who, shocker, he's going to also be in this lineup, giving that away. But Dak Prescott, he's like top 5 most expensive, but he's not at the top. So I was happy paying up for him.
Yeah, I'm getting a little crazy here because I'm looking for some return, and with these lineups, I'm always looking for 3x. That means if I'm spending, well, I'll tell you, I'm spending 6,000 on my quarterback. I'm hoping for 18 points from my quarterback, and that's why I'm going with Spencer Rattler
Wow.
at at home
That's
against the
bold.
yeah at home against the Bucks. The Bucks have had a long week. It's been tough for them. Being displaced there for practice. So I think their defense will maybe be a little bit slow out of the gate. And Rattler said he's going to get the ball to Chris Olave. We're holding this to you, Spencer Rattler. I think you also get the tight end a little bit more involved, Alvin Kamara. And I think Rattler will do a little bit of running. I know that's not necessarily an awesome strength of his or anything, but I think he'll be more willing to take off, certainly, than Derek Carr. So we just don't need a lot out of him, right? We need 18 points. Can we get it? It also allows me to load up the rest of my roster. So I really feel good about Rattler just maybe getting 15 to 18 points and getting the return I need and helping these other guys have some big games.
Listen, I cannot wait to hear who else you have in your lineup because you're going to be able to spend up. My Dak Prescott cost 8,000, so 2,000 more than Rattler. So I wasn't able to spend up as much elsewhere. But my running back, I did spend up on Jahmyr Gibbs, 7,800. So again, not at the top of the position, but still pricey. But I already talked about it. I think he's going to have a great game against the Cowboys. And then Antonio Gibson is my sleeper running back this week. Now that it doesn't seem like Ramondre Stevenson's going to play, they're going to have to lean on the run game, even if they're getting their butts kicked. But like Drake May, they can't put everything on him, and there should be a lot of checkdowns as well. So 5,500 for him, nice and cheap. So Jahmyr Gibbs and Antonio Gibson are my two running backs.
All right, I like those choices for sure because we talked them up early in the show. So we were expecting them to have big games. Now I'm going with my first back. I'm locking him in. I think it's week 1, week 2 all over again for J.K. Dobbins against the Broncos. Now, I may have inflated their run defense woes, but through all metrics, you should run on the Broncos and not pass on the Broncos. And you have a team that's going to be the most willingest running team with Greg Roman in the NFL. They've studied film. They've had an extra week. They know how to attack the Broncos defense. So J.K. Dobbins, J.K. all day, returns here against Denver. And then my other running back, Titans. I think they figured out some things with their running game before the bye, and they got to lean more on the run, take pressure off Will Levis. They have a great matchup to do so this week at home against the Colts. So I'm going Tony Pollard. By the way, these guys are pretty still affordable, so I'm saving my money, hint, for some other positions here. But I have 6,700 for Dobbins and 7,000 for Pollard. So really good values based on their workload and these matchups and how these teams need to win games.
I did consider both of them, so I like those picks. Going on to my wide receivers, I went high here with Jamar Chase, one of the most expensive wide receivers out there at 9,500, one of the most expensive players of the week. But love his matchup, love everything he's been doing, so I'm willing to pay up for him. Then Jalen Tolbert, like I said, he's one of my favorite plays, and he's way too cheap at 6,100. So happy to go with him to stack here with Dak Prescott. And then Darius Slayton, once we heard the Malik Neighbors news, he got 11 targets last week. Again, this is a nice matchup on both sides of this ball, right? For the Bengals against the Giants and for the Giants against the Bengals. This should be a high scoring game. So going Darius Slayton, Jalen Tolbert, and Jamar Chase.
Yeah, I'm going with 3 wide receivers, 1 Cowboy as well, but my Cowboy is CeeDee Lamb. I'm going up for CD. They need to use him. He's been asking for the ball here. I think Tolbert has a nice game as well, but I'm willing to pay up right behind Jamar Chase, 9,300 for CeeDee Lamb. So I will tell you this, I'm playing Rattler, quote, naked this week. I'm not stacking Rattler. So I usually do stack, but not in this case this week because there's some other guys I liked a little bit more that I did not want to play Chris Olave. So I'm going with Zay Flowers. I love the matchup against the Commanders. He's got 7,200 as his price. So I think he has another big game after going over 100 last week for the Ravens. And then this matchup is also sneaky good. Talk about sleeper and flex play this week. He's been getting a lot of targets. Michael Wilson, very good matchup here against the Packers. So I'm really excited to see what they can do. And really, it's a good matchup because, again, the secondary is giving up some yards. And Jair Alexander, he's been banged up. He might be on Marvin Harrison Jr. So I like that with Michael Wilson.
Awesome. Love it. And then our tight end, I'm going with Theo Johnson for my tight end. Again, a second Giants player. So this is really like putting a lot of faith in Daniel Jones. But I do have a lot of faith in Daniel Jones. But Theo Johnson saw a career high 5 receptions for 48 yards last week. The Bengals allowed 3 touchdowns to tight ends last week against the Ravens. But Theo Johnson's running a lot of routes. He's a young rookie, but they're getting him more involved. And without Malik Neighbors, I think he could have another career high game. Like, just keep recording those. So super cheap. I had to go cheap. 4,900. I like Theo Johnson as a sleeper this week at tight end.
Okay, I am going a little bit more expensive, but not all the way to the top here because I like this matchup without George Kittle available to us, or Travis Kelce, I should say. I do like some Kyle Pitts this week, and it's 5,900, so among the higher end tight ends. But I do like him because the Panthers linebacker safeties, they're an absolute mess here, and this is a great game for him to get going. I think he even finds the end zone this one, so I love Kyle Pitts in this matchup. I think really you can play all your Falcons with confidence this week. I think they're going to take it to the Panthers.
Now I'm going up high here again for my flex. I'm going with Jaden Reed. I don't care about last week. He had that huge play and nothing else, but I think Jaden Reed against this Cardinals defense, I think he comes back and has another massive game. So 7,700 is not too expensive, also not cheap. So I kind of went on the higher end here in my flex spot. And then for my defense to close up my lineup, I went with the Chargers against the Broncos because Bo Nix is not legit, and the Chargers have a very good defense.
All right, so I'll tell you this. I do have the Chargers, so let's check them off. So we've double approved the Chargers. I do also have a Packer in my flex, but it's a little bit different. It's Josh Jacobs, and I think he comes through again against the Cardinals defense. So I kind of like having Josh Jacobs on the positive game script side at home against Green Bay, Michael Wilson on the negative game script side. We think that's how it's going to go this week. Jordan Love, don't throw interceptions. Throw touchdowns to Jaden Reed and let Josh Jacobs score. We'll all be very happy with that. So Josh Jacobs has another nice game. He was very solid last week. Again, he's getting going here in this offense. And again, the matchup is really good. You can run on the Cardinals. Their tackles are weak. That's how you attack them with Jonathan Gannon's defense. So Chargers sign off, another Packer. Get some Packers in there. Get some Cowboys in there. You know where the matchups are this week.
Yeah, to run down my lineup here, I got Dak Prescott at quarterback, Jahmyr Gibbs and Antonio Gibson at running back, Jalen Tolbert, Darius Slayton, Jamar Chase, and then Jaden Reed as my wide receivers. Jaden Reed's in the flex. And then I have Theo Johnson at tight end and the Chargers defense.
All right, I'll start with the Chargers defense and work back, but Chargers defense, we both agree on. So that's our stone cold lock here that you need to get in your lineup. I have Spencer Rattler quarterback, and then I'm going with the 3 running backs with one in the flex, Josh Jacobs, Tony Pollard, J.K. Dobbins, CeeDee Lamb, Zay Flowers, and Michael Wilson are my wide receivers, and we have Kyle Pitts at tight end. So I feel good about both these lineups. I mean, I don't always say that. Maybe I don't always say that publicly, but I usually feel worse about my lineup than yours, but I feel good about both this week.
Maybe we'll make some money this week. Who knows? That is it for today's episode. Thank you to all for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. Everydayers will be back on Monday, digging into everything that happened this past weekend. I hope you all win your fantasy matchups. Good luck, everybody. Bye, y'all.